When most people hear the word God, they think of a personal being, a judge or a creator, somebody standing on the outside looking in. So when we hear that Albert Einstein, the father of modern physics, believed in God, it sounds like a contradiction. Was he secretly religious? Was he just being poetic? Or was he, as some atheists believe, using the word God as a metaphor for the unknown? Einstein was actually very clear. He did not believe in a God who rewards or punishes, or even cares about human affairs. But he was also very clear about something else. He was not an atheist. He actually occupied a middle ground that most of us struggle to even imagine. We're exploring a view of reality that sits at the razor-sharp edge between science, modern physics, and what the ancient traditions have been talking about for millennia. Science is one of humanity's greatest achievements. It's measurable and testable and falsifiable, and it's how we understand the world around us. It helps us to understand how stars are born, how the human brain works, how life evolves. When I say I have faith in science, what I'm saying is that it is the best tool that we have to avoid self-deception about finite things. If something can be measured, then science should measure it. And when science tells us something reliable about the world around us, we should listen. That is intellectual integrity. But things often become confused because not everything we care about is finite. Love, for example. You can detect hormones, you can scan neural correlates, you can measure behavioral impacts, but love itself is not quantifiable. You don't love 3 units more than you did yesterday, and you're not going to run out of love by the end of the week. You can't measure compassion in centimeters. Love is known directly, but it's not measured, and that is the point. Because when people talk about God, at least in the mystical tradition, they're not talking about some large object hiding somewhere in the universe. They are pointing to something infinite and intimate, something closer to love than to a thing. And because something is infinite, it cannot be measured. You can try to measure infinity, but you will be measuring for eternity. This is why the conversation between science and spirituality often goes wrong. Science deals with the measurable, and spirituality deals with the immeasurable. And because our society and culture tends to absolutize science, then it says that anything that is not measurable isn't real. But that is just a category error. It's like saying that meaning doesn't exist because you can't weigh it. And this tension between spirituality and science isn't something that's new. In the 4th century, Augustine of Hippo tried to warn Christians not to reject science in favor of literal interpretation of scripture. He argued that when religious interpretations clashed with reliable knowledge, then the interpretations must change, not reality. In other words, faith that ignores evidence corrodes itself. And Augustine was saying this 1600 years ago. Fast forward to modern science, and something interesting has happened. The deeper science goes, the stranger reality seems to be. At the level of everyday experience, the universe appears solid and separate and mechanical. But when we look at the foundations, at quantum physics, at cosmology, at consciousness studies, then that picture begins to dissolve. Separation becomes ambiguous. Particles become probabilities, objects become processes, and time itself begins to be questionable. And with all of this comes awe. Not doctrine or belief, just awe. Einstein often said that he believed in Spinoza's God, and by this he meant that there isn't a God outside of the universe. He meant that God is the order, harmony, and intelligibility of the universe itself. For Einstein, God was the deep, lawful structure of reality. The fact that the universe is not chaotic, the fact that it's describable, the fact that mathematics works, The fact that beauty and order seems woven into every scale of reality. This is why he spoke so often of awe, reverence for the sheer intelligibility of what exists. In his words, this sense of cosmic awe is the highest form of spirituality. Now, if you strip away the Western religious language altogether, then Einstein's view of the world starts to look remarkably like Daoism. The Tao is the pattern behind all patterns. It is the way that reality naturally unfolds. It is something that cannot be grasped conceptually, but can be lived in harmony with. Lao Tzu says that the Tao cannot be named or defined, and Einstein is saying something very similar when he says that the divine is not a being, but the lawful harmony of what exists. Both perspectives point to the same intuition, that reality is not random, and it's not meaningless, and we are not separate from it. In Daoism, wisdom comes from aligning ourselves with this underlying order. And Einstein says that humility comes from recognizing that we are part of something that is much greater than ourselves. That what we call God or Tao or the laws of nature is not some kind of object in the universe, but the intelligible wholeness of the universe itself. Many scientists echo this. Richard Feynman often spoke with reverence about the beauty of physical law. Carl Sagan described the universe as a way for the cosmos to know itself. And Erwin Schrödinger questioned whether consciousness could be divided into separate selves at all. This is where thinkers like Donald Hoffman enter the conversation. He doesn't argue that spirituality stands against science. He's arguing that science might be pointing beyond naive physical realism. His work in conscious realism suggests that the world as we perceive it, space, time, and objects, may not be fundamental. They may be an interface, representations, icons. They may not be reality itself. He says, I think that conscious realism can breach the wall between science and spirituality. This ideological barrier is a needless illusion. So where does this leave us? It leaves us on a spectrum. On the one end, experimentation, measurement, control, prediction, and on the other end, consciousness, being, love. It's yin and yang. They are not separate from each other. They are the finite and the infinite aspects of the one reality. Science is describing how things behave, and spirituality is the experience of being. Ultimately, these two ends are not opposed. The measurable arises within the immeasurable. The finite arises within the infinite. You cannot find the universe outside of consciousness, and you cannot find consciousness as an object inside of the universe. They both arise together as two perspectives on one reality. So maybe faith in science does not mean rejecting the divine, and maybe trust in the infinite does not mean abandoning reason. Maybe they meet in the same place, with humility before what is. Because whatever we call it, God, the universe, love, consciousness, being, it is not something that stands outside of us. It is what we are. For thousands of years, mystics have been telling us that separation is an illusion. And now it seems that science is catching up. Watch this video and I'll tell you about 3 Nobel Prize winning discoveries that suggest that maybe the mystics were right.